Hello, wonderful families. I hope this finds you well. Today's video is going to talk about a technique that I think most of us have talked about together at some point over the course of the year, but it is something that we do in our small group reading instruction called choral reading. Okay, now basically what choral reading is, it's a technique where everybody, so teachers and students, are all reading the same text out loud together. Okay, so now this is different from a read aloud thing that we do. And basically a read aloud is where the reader, and usually that's a teacher, but it could be a student too, where the reader is the only person that is reading out loud, and everybody else is more or less absorbing as they read. And the reader might be asking some different questions, some comprehension questions throughout the text, and the students might respond to that. But as far as reading the story, there's pretty much one person doing the reading. In choral reading, everybody is reading what they can together out loud. Okay, and what the research says behind this is that when there is like a stronger reader, which will be the adult or the teacher, when there is a stronger reader reading consistently, the readers that are struggling a little bit, when they are in that situation where everybody's kind of reading together, it helps expand vocabulary. It helps develop those decoding skills to figure out how to read on their own. And also, some of the most important thing is that it helps build that confidence in reading. Okay, and that's really a lot of the problems that we see in reading, is that sometimes people just don't feel confident in the reading. So that helps all of that. Now, we should note that some teachers, some classrooms do choral reading in different ways. The way that we do it in our classroom is that we pretty much have everybody have the same text. Okay, so everybody has the same story in front of them. Okay, and what we do is we choose what are called leveled reading books. So these are books that are they're designed to be at a certain level of reading, and there's a progression of things, either the kinds of words that's in there, how many words are in there, how those words are put together, the content, all those kind of things are all factored into leveled reading. So we find a book that is, basically at their reading level, just maybe a tiny bit, a little bit harder than what they would be able to read on their own. Okay, different than something they'd be able to read independently from the first reading. Something that's a little bit tiny bit ahead, because we want them to be struggling a little bit and have that stronger reader kind of leading the way through it. That's how we have that growth. So we choose these books. And what we do is we'll have everybody follow along. There's some ways that we could check to make sure that the students are tracking the words as they're being read out loud. What we do is we say, okay, everybody use your reading finger. And the reading finger is this right here, okay? And we'll when I show the examples for in a little bit, you'll see how the finger goes along the page. Now, some of our friends, they don't like the feel of the paper with their finger touching the paper. They don't like the feel of that. So what we do for them is we say, okay, use your reading eraser. Okay, now reading eraser, here it is, the magic reading eraser. We just have them take their pencil, turn it around, because we don't use the point, because then they'll be drawn all over the book. Have their reading eraser there, and instead of using their finger, they could follow along using this magic thing right here. So that's kind of what we do there. So let's just kind of dive into it a little bit, show some examples of what choral reading looks like. So here's an example here of something that we might read in small groups. So basically, once everybody's settled and everybody has their own book, I might say something like, okay, everybody, let's take your reading fingers and point to the title. So everybody's going to point to the title. And I said, okay, everybody, let's read the title together. Ready, go. What lives here?
Okay, and then everybody's reading what they can as they go along there. And then for this, just looking at the cover of the book, I'll ask some questions here. So like, so hey, what do you think, if this is our first time reading it, what do you think this book is going to be about? And what tells you that? So they might say, well, what lives here? They might say something about the title, or they'll say, well, I see a deer here. I think it's going to be about animals, or I think it's going to be about the forest, or I think it's going to be about the stream. And then you ask, well, why do you think that? You know, and just have them pointing to either the pictures or the text, connecting those ideas to things they see. Okay, so that's what we do with the cover. So then I might say something like, okay, everybody, let's open up to page 3. And everybody, let's get your reading fingers on the first word. So then I'll make sure that everybody's putting their finger on the word. And then I said, all right, everybody, let's read together. Ready, go. Animals live here. Okay, next page. Ready, go. A bear lives here. Now, notice the pacing that I do, especially at the first reading, is going to be a little bit slower, just so we're getting more of the words. But a lot of this choral reading, too, as we get more familiar with the words, would be to speed it up more, so it's more of like a natural phrasing of the book. So I might pause, go from page to page in the beginning, but eventually, the next day or the day after, depending on how much we need it, I might say, okay, everybody, let's open up to page 3, and let's get your reading fingers on the first word. Or if it's familiar, I might say, okay, let's get your reading fingers on the word animals. So I might change it up like that. And then I'll say, okay, ready, go. Animals live here. A bear lives here. So I might go in a little bit more rapid succession like that, the more we get going, so they get a general feel of that, of the rhythm of that. And here's another example. So here's an example from a different book and at a different level. And so for this, I'll use our reading eraser for this, so you could just see that in action for those that don't want to use their reading fingers. So for something like this, we'll say like, okay, everybody, use your reading fingers or reading erasers in the first word. And let's read together. Okay, ready, go. My name is Beanie. Now, let's say, for instance, everybody just, well, Beanie, they never saw that word before. We weren't even close getting that. If things like that happens, especially earlier on, I might say like, okay, that word is beanie. Everybody point to the word beanie. Beanie. What does that word say again? Beanie. So we see that again. It's the character's name, and sometimes the character's names are gonna be the most unfamiliar of the words. So we'll hit those together a little bit, okay? And so then what I might do is then, let's just start from the top again. Ready, go. My name is Beanie. I am a detective. That means I solve mysteries, okay? So while you're reading, what you want to do is you want to take a look at the students around you and see, are they tracking those words? Because more than not, first time through, we're not getting detective. We're probably not going to be getting a word like mysteries at the first time through, and that's okay. But the important thing is, especially in the beginning, is to know that they're tracking as you're saying the word and you're kind of leading the way, okay? If there's a problem tracking and they're just kind of totally done, then I would bring attention to that. It's like, let's try that again, make sure everybody's tracking along, because that is a really important thing, to make sure that everybody's tracking the words as they go along, okay? Okay, so here's just one kind of last example to wrap this up. Let's say we're at the end of the book, okay? And so something that might happen would be like, okay, everybody, let's take your reading finger. Let's go to the first word you see on page 12. Okay, everybody, ready, go. Now Claire thinks I'm the best detective in the world. She could be right. All right, good. Now that you're done with the book, now is a time where I would start asking some questions, So it might just be really broad questions like, hey, what did you notice? What was this story about? What are some of the characters in the story? And so they might say something like Claire, or they might say Beanie, or another character in the story, and then say, okay, well, can you go back to the page where like, how do you know that? Go show me in the book how you know that. So then they're going back to the page and they're justifying their answer with something either in the text or in the illustrations. Okay, but typically with choral reading, and other other people do this method differently. I usually for choral reading, I usually don't ask the comprehension questions through the reading. I usually save that more for the end. Okay, that's just my personal preference, but everybody kind of does that differently.
And the thing to really note about choral reading is that it takes time, So you'll read through the passage or the story one day, ask your comprehension questions, you put it away. The next day, you do it again. The next day, you do it again. And along the way, everybody picks up more, gets more comfortable with the material, and it gets better and better through that progression. Okay, but it's not something that it's going to happen in one day. Okay, again, okay, again, okay, again on the same day. I like to let things kind of like settle, marinate for a little bit. Move on to some other things over the span of a couple days. And once you begin to get a general sense that everybody's like more comfortable with it, and they're picking up more words, and they're pretty comfortable with the story, then I would ask them to read it independently. So you could just check, hey, are they really reading it on their own? And where are some other places that we maybe need to support? Okay, but it does take a couple days. Outside of that, I think we are good on choral reading. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm always here to help. So until next time, I hope you stay well and take care.